Hi, this is Emerald and welcome to the Diamond Net, and today I'm going to be teaching you 2 practices for letting go of your limiting beliefs. Okay, so today I'm going to be teaching you about how to let go of your limiting beliefs, but let me go ahead and explain what they are first. So limiting beliefs are beliefs that keep you from realizing your full potential, or that stand in the way of certain needs that you have or certain wants that you have. And limiting beliefs can either be conscious or unconscious. So we could genuinely believe them with our conscious mind and say, yes, that's something I believe, or we can have beliefs that exist underneath the surface that are usually holdovers from an earlier time period. So let's say that when I was 5 years old, I believed that no one would ever be my friend. And as I went through life, I experienced plenty of friendships. So consciously, I know that people will be my friend and that I can absolutely establish friendships. But maybe there's a holdover, a part of me that got repressed way back when I was 5 years old. And from the shadow, this aspect is still believing that I'm never going to find a friend. And so that limiting belief can be operating from underneath the surface, even though I consciously believe something totally different. Now, when it comes to the impacts of having limiting beliefs can impact us in really, really negative ways. So one example would be, let's say I have some kind of innate potential for leadership, but let's say I have certain limiting beliefs that no one's going to take me seriously and that I don't have good things to say. Then maybe what's going to happen in that case is that I'm never going to realize my potentials for leadership, and I'm never going to take the risks that would actually lead to more growth of those potentials. Another example would be, let's say I have some kind of innate ability toward artistic expression, but I was taught that, artists and art is just a frivolous endeavor, and that the only people who are really worth taking seriously are people who go into math and science, and so anybody who's interested in art is just very frivolous. And so because I have this limiting belief, the innate tendency that I have toward being an artist and toward creativity gets stifled because I don't want to come under scrutiny in that way, and I don't want to be viewed as somebody who is frivolous. Or another example would be, let's say that if I find someone attractive, but I believe that I'm not worthy of having a good relationship, or I'm not worthy of being desired in some way, those limiting beliefs will stop me from going and talking to that person, which guarantees that nothing will ever be established and that nothing will ever happen. So limiting beliefs can really cause you to miss out on a lot of experiences and a lot of personal growth. And that's why it's really, really important to be able to let go of limiting beliefs. Now, limiting beliefs can be very difficult to let go of, and there are 2 main reasons for this. One of the main reasons is because it can be very difficult to identify our limiting beliefs. Sometimes we don't even know that we have them. The second reason is that our beliefs, our worldview, is the foundation that our ego or identity is scaffolded upon. And so if we start questioning our beliefs, what might happen is this might feel like we're actually undermining our ego or undermining our identity. So let's go into these one at a time. So the first one is that limiting beliefs are very difficult to identify, or at least they can be. So there is a parable where there are 2 young fish swimming around, and a wise old fish swims up to them and says, "How's the water today, kids?" And the 2 young fish say, "What's water?" So basically we're like a fish in water when it comes to our beliefs in general, and our limiting beliefs can be no different. So we oftentimes don't even question the things that we've taken for granted. Now, it was Socrates that said something to the nature of, "I know I am the wisest man, for I know that I know nothing." And ultimately, this is the perspective that we as human beings are in when it comes to our ability to know anything beyond a shadow of a doubt, because we are always 100% unconscious to the things that we are unconscious of. So we can always experience a reveal that comes to negate everything that we've ever known. And this is because we are firing from a subjective perspective that's limited. So let's say if, for example, I point to something, or let's say I go, oh, the sky is blue. And let's say that you agree with me and you say, yes, I agree with you, the sky is blue. Well, neither of us can guarantee that we're actually seeing the same color. You could be totally seeing a different palette of colors than what I see, but we're calling the same color blue. And when it comes to what's objectively there, well, we can't know that beyond a shadow of a doubt because none of us have ever seen beyond our subjective perspective. We never see behind anyone else's eyes, and we never see outside of the lens that our sensory organs allow us to see through. And when we realize how much that we can never know, which is pretty much everything, this enables us to get some distance from our most deeply held or taken for granted beliefs. And so if we can parse things into a category of these are the things that I know for sure, and these are the things that I assume to be true, what we'll find is that the things that we know for sure, that bucket is fairly empty, whereas the things that we assume to be true, that bucket is very, very full. And so once we start looking at each and every single one of our beliefs and we go, okay, hang on a second, how do I know this? Do I know this beyond a shadow of a doubt? So things like, we're on the planet Earth. I've never personally observed being on the planet Earth. I'm sure it's true, so if someone bet me money, I'd be like, okay, yeah, sure, I bet you $1 million that we're on the planet Earth right now. But the reality is that I don't know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the platform I'm sitting on right now is the planet Earth. For all I know, it could be a very elaborate ruse where people set up this illusion that I'm sitting here on the planet Earth, and I would never be the wiser. So in the relative sense, I could say that yes, I know that I'm on the planet Earth, but in the absolute sense, I say that I can't know anything beyond a shadow of a doubt. And when you do this, you can get some distance from your beliefs, and you can start to get the sense that you're actually a fish that exists in a substance called water, and you can start to understand what water is from that perspective. Once you start questioning your beliefs and understanding how little you know, you can start to look at those beliefs under a microscope and to suspend them. And you can even now put them in categories of, okay, these beliefs are true and these beliefs are untrue. These beliefs, open up new possibilities for me, whereas these beliefs shut down possibilities for me. And also with this awareness, you can start to question taken for granted beliefs about reality and relative to your worldview, and also beliefs about yourself and your identity as well. Now, the second reason that limiting beliefs are so difficult to let go of is because our beliefs or our worldview is the foundation of our identity. When we're children and we're being indoctrinated by our family and by our community of origin, these serve as the foundation stones of our worldview. And then we start to build an identity in relation to those. And so we start to build ourselves in relation to how our parents and our community of origin tells us we are, and we start to think about things in relation to the way that they think about things. And so if we are raised in a community where it's really highly valued to be a self-sacrificing person, then in order to be good, and to build an identity of goodness within that community of origin, then we're going to have to start to build our identity and to polarize into parts of our personality around self-sacrifice and to let go of parts of ourself that are more individualistic. And so when it's the case that we're learning about, let's say, a particular worldview when we're small children, we are also scaffolding our identity directly upon that worldview. So the identity and the worldview tend to be very deeply intertwined. And as we go through our experiences, what happens is that we go through shifts in our worldview and we make changes to our identity to accommodate those shifts. And so as the worldview grows and changes, so does our identity grow and change. And so when it's the case that we're going in to deconstruct the worldview, we're actually taking out some of the foundation stones of our identity at the same time. And so it can be very, very difficult for us to let go of our beliefs, including our limiting beliefs, because our identity may very well be scaffolded upon those beliefs. So I'm going to give an example of how this could be the case. And this is actually one that I experienced myself. So when I was a child, I learned from my parents, from society, and from popular culture that being humble is a good thing. And I related being humble to being self-deprecating. And that if somebody is, let's say, too self-congratulatory, that they're conceited or self-centered. And so in order to be a good person and to shape myself as a good person, then I had to become humble and to let go of being self-centered. And the way that I did this is by starting to adopt certain limiting beliefs about myself, saying that, oh, there's nothing too special about me, I'm not good at this, I'm not pretty, I'm not this, I'm not that. And basically, the whole time, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build this identity of goodness around being this good, humble person by picking myself apart and by criticizing myself. So at the time, these limiting beliefs were keeping me from a lot of potentials that I had, because I would oftentimes create this narrative like I'm not good enough to do this or I can't do that, and so I can't became like a belief of mine at the time. And part of that was my way of maintaining my identity of being a good person and maintaining the idea of being humble. It wasn't until later on in my teen years when I started to rethink those values and say, okay, well, maybe humility has its place, but I can also own my strengths without being conceited, and I can also celebrate myself without, let's say, being too big-headed about things. And this gave me much more space to drop those beliefs and to be able to establish new beliefs that were actually enabling me to reach my fuller potential. But if I would have kept that same belief unexamined about humility meaning being self-deprecating and being conceited meaning being self-loving, then that would have been a situation where I wouldn't have been able to let go of those limiting beliefs without seeing myself as a bad person, and it would have put me into an identity crisis. So when it comes to letting go of our beliefs, it often requires us to deconstruct our identity a bit and deconstruct our worldview a bit to make it structurally sound for us to start believing different things about ourselves and to start believing different things about reality. Another thing to keep in mind is that beliefs are always castles in the sky. So because we as human beings are in this fundamental blind spot to be able to know anything beyond a shadow of a doubt, when it's the case that we're indoctrinated as children, that's the foundation stone of our worldview. But that foundation stone isn't set in anywhere sturdy, it is a castle in the sky. So it's floating in thin air. And so we build up our worldview and we build up our identity concurrently with our worldview, and those two things become very deeply married together with one another. But underneath our worldview and underneath our identity is nothingness. And so if we are worried about facing with uncertainty, or if we are concerned about undermining our worldview or undermining our identity, we will hold on to every belief that we have in order to keep that castle in the sky standing. And ultimately, it is the ego's #1 goal to keep itself alive. So if you're questioning limiting beliefs that the ego happens to be scaffolded upon, then you're going to run into a lot of resistance when it comes to deconstructing those views. So our beliefs, including our limiting beliefs, can be incredibly difficult to let go of because they're the foundation upon which our ego is scaffolded. And so if we start questioning our limiting beliefs and letting go of them, and they happen to be a weight-bearing stone for our ego, if we pull them out without the proper deconstruction work, we can really send ourselves into identity crisis. And so the ego wants to maintain a sense of homeostasis so things don't get chaotic, and so that we can still maintain a sense of meaning and a sense of identity and a sense of existing in a world that makes sense. And so we'll oftentimes go into cognitive dissonance and resistance whenever it comes to our attempts to deconstruct these beliefs. So with this in mind, here are 2 practices that you can use to start letting go of your limiting beliefs. So the first one is a more general practice for loosening up your hold on your beliefs in general. So in this, what you're going to do is you're going to look at your most cherished beliefs and you'll write them down on a piece of paper. These are the beliefs that you hold on to the most tightly, that you're the most attached to. And when you look at them, you want to ask yourself a question for each one. You want to say, if this cherished belief were untrue, how would that make me feel and think differently about myself? Then you want to think about the polar opposite perspective from your cherished belief. So for example, if I have a cherished belief that people are fundamentally good, then the opposite belief of that would be people are fundamentally bad. So what I would want to do in this exercise is to take the perspective people are fundamentally bad, and I want to consider and ask myself a similar question. So if that belief were true, if that opposite belief to my cherished belief were true, how would that make me feel and think differently about myself? And because these are your most cherished beliefs, this will allow you to recognize the stakes behind why you hold on to beliefs so strongly in the first place. And looking at the most cherished beliefs tends to have the most impact because you're becoming conscious of the most vulnerable parts of yourself that are using your beliefs as a protection mechanism. Now you can also go through the same practice using just the limiting belief. So you can say, okay, if my limiting belief were true, how would that make me feel and think differently about myself? If my limiting belief weren't true, how would that make me think and feel differently about myself? And you can go through that practice too, and that can be very valuable. But the reason why I focus on the cherished beliefs here is that if you're able to get that level of awareness when it comes to why you hold on to your cherished beliefs so tightly and what vulnerabilities are there, this creates a kind of situation where you can get more distance from your beliefs in general. I like to think about it a bit like if you were trying to pull a sticker off of something and it's really stuck on there, and then you soak that thing and then the sticker peels right off after you've soaked it. So I like to think about this practice as being like soaking your beliefs a bit so that you can get that distance, and the awareness of the vulnerabilities underneath these beliefs and why we attach to them is a great way to do that. All right, so then we have the second practice, which works more directly with the limiting beliefs. So what you want to do first is you want to start by making a list of all of the limiting beliefs that typically hold you back. And one by one, you want to go down the list and ask the following questions. The first question is, what is the origin point of that belief? When did you first start believing it? The second question is, what part of this belief is true, and what part of this belief comes from the interpretation about what's true? So think about it this way. Let's say the facts are like dots, and then we can connect those dots in all sorts of different ways. So the dots are what's true, and then we have all sorts of interpretations and meanings that we're using to connect the dots. Let's say, for example, it's true that I've experienced trauma. So let's say that that's true. And I make the meaning out of that, oh, I've experienced trauma, and therefore that means that I'm broken and that I'll never be fixed and that I won't be able to have functional relationships. And I go into this whole shame narrative with it. So basically what's true is I've experienced trauma. That's a dot. Whereas now all of these other meanings, those are the connections between the dots. So it's important to be able to separate the facts from the interpretations of the facts. I could take that same fact and interpret it a totally different way. So it's true that I've experienced trauma, but I can make it mean that, oh, well, that means that I understand people more deeply because now I've been hurt in the same way that other people are hurt. And I know that trauma is a common human experience. And so it's something that connects me to the rest of humanity. And now when I come to understand that in me, I can come to understand other people. So when it comes to your limiting beliefs, you want to really separate it out between what's a fact here and what's an interpretation of those facts, and be very, very clear about the distinction between the two. What's a dot and what's a line between the dots? The next question you want to ask is, how is this belief meant to protect or serve me? For example, like I had mentioned earlier, I had a lot of self-deprecating beliefs earlier on in my life because I thought it made me good. I thought humble people are good. Humble people have self-deprecating beliefs. And so when I have beliefs that undercut my abilities or that criticize myself, that means that's me being a humble and good person. So there are often benevolent, self-interested intentions behind why we hold on to limiting beliefs. So once I know the way that I'm trying to protect or serve myself by holding on to this belief, I want to question what are some other ways that don't involve this limiting belief that enable me to protect and serve myself the same way? Or conversely, what are some ways to actually render the need for that service or protection obsolete? So if I can resolve the underlying reason why I feel like I need to be protected or why I'm trying to serve myself in that way, then there's no reason for me to hold on to that limiting belief anymore. For example, let's say that I've developed certain limiting beliefs that have caused me to feel a feeling of self-doubt. So maybe my limiting belief is I'm not good enough. So with that, if I question what is the reason, the benevolent intention underneath why I'm holding on to that belief that I'm not good enough. So I might be holding on to that because I feel like it protects me from judgment. So if I can doubt myself and stop myself from enacting certain goals of mine, then other people won't be able to judge me, and I'll be able to keep myself safe from the experience of being judged and feeling shame. So in this case, I want to ask, is there some other way to protect myself from being judged or feeling shame? Or is there a way to feel more comfortable being judged and feeling shame that enables me to be willing to experience those things or able to tolerate those things better, such that I don't need to keep the limiting beliefs on board that I'm not good enough? And the final question that you'll want to ask yourself is, what are some other interpretations that are possible? So if I have the thought that I don't have anything good to say and that's my limiting belief, what are some other ways that I can look at that? What are some ways that I could see things from a different angle? For example, instead of saying I don't have anything good to say, maybe it's I have a hard time tapping into my deeper perspective, so I have a hard time expressing what I want to say. It's not that I don't have anything good to say, it's that I am not yet in touch with it. So these are just a couple of practices that you can use to start letting go of your limiting beliefs. But ultimately, what's going to be the most helpful is to question them. So to continue saying, okay, where do these beliefs come from? Why am I holding on to them so much? How can I let go of them? Anyway, so that's all I have for you for now. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead, click the like button below and subscribe and leave me a comment down below. Also, if you would like to learn about shadow work, I highly recommend checking out my free shadow work masterclass called the 6 Simple Steps to Shadow Integration. In this masterclass, I share my entire system for how I approach the topic of shadow work, and I've basically systematized it and given lots of interesting tidbits of information and tools there for you to use to help you along with your shadow work journey. So I hope you check that out. Again, that's shadowintegration.org/masterclass. Anyway, so that's all I have for you for now, and until next time, keep becoming more you.